They said I was greedy, the evil older sister who stole the beach house from my brother and his kids. The whole family sat there looking at me like a thief, right up until the lawyer opened a thick folder and pulled out messages my brother himself had sent our parents, plotting to cut me out of everything. The day my dad died, the leather chair outside the lawyer's office became the hardest place in the world to sit. I sat there with a paper cup of cold coffee in both hands, staring at a tiny crack in the tile. The wall clock ticked steadily, cutting through the soft shuffle of papers behind the reception desk. Nobody was saying anything to me, but the way they glanced over and whispered to each other was louder than any argument. Across from me, my younger brother Ethan sat with one leg crossed over the other, crisp white shirt, shiny new watch peeking out from under his cuff. Next to him was his wife, Kayla, in sharp high heels and perfectly curled Instagram hair. Their 2 kids were hunched over their phones, sometimes glancing up, restless and clueless about the storm about to hit the adults. Kayla leaned toward my aunt, voice lowered, but not low enough that I couldn't hear it in that small waiting area. "Everyone knows the beach house was always meant for our family," she said, smiling with her mouth, but not her eyes. "She doesn't even have kids. What would she need a 3-bedroom vacation home for?" My aunt froze for a second, shot me a quick look, then turned away. Ethan shrugged and added, "She never even hangs out with the kids. She's always moody. Mum and Dad said it a million times. The beach house is for our family gatherings." She was me. I'm 52, never married, no kids. In this family, that was enough to turn me from daughter into something extra. An extra chair, an extra plate, an extra person you move around to make other people more comfortable. I took a sip of the bitter coffee, trying to swallow the lump stuck in my throat. I thought I had prepared myself for this day, the reading of my parents' final will, but sitting there just a few steps from that heavy wooden door, I could feel my hands shaking. In the pocket of my coat, my fingers curled around a chipped metal keyring. It was the key to the beach house, the only thing my mother managed to press into my hand with her thin, IV-bruised fingers before she died. "Keep it," she'd whispered that day, so weak I had to lean in to catch the words. "Don't let anyone take it from you. That's your home." Now, sitting under harsh fluorescent lights, that sentence kept looping in my head like waves hitting the same stretch of sand over and over again. Steady, relentless, not peaceful at all. A chair scraped loudly. One of my cousins walked in and clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "So," he joked, half kidding, half not, "little bro's about to be the big man of the beach house, huh? The kids are gonna love it." Ethan laughed, not denying it at all. Kayla said something about finally renovating that old shack for the kids, and then they both glanced at me like I was just an obstacle that needed to be moved out of the way. I lowered my head and looked at my worn, sensible shoes. Those shoes had gone up and down those creaky beach house steps more times than I could count, carried me through late-night pharmacy runs and early morning walks down to the water with my mum. The thing they were all fighting over today, a 3-bedroom cottage by the ocean, for me wasn't an asset or an investment. It was the smell of salt and chowder in the kitchen, the sound of the floorboards complaining under my mother's footsteps, the summers when I could finally be something other than the kid in charge of watching her little brother. But in that waiting room, in most of my relatives' eyes, the beach house was just this. A 3-bedroom oceanfront property in a town where prices kept climbing. A backdrop for Christmas card photos. A future Airbnb listing. A content set. "We've promised the kids so many times," Kayla went on, this time not even bothering to lower her voice, "that this house would be theirs one day. It's their legacy." "Legacy," I repeated in my head. It sounded like something you stencil in cursive on a wooden sign and hang over a fireplace. Out there at the beach house, it was carved into every scuff and salt stain on the walls. The receptionist stepped out from behind the counter and gave us a tight little smile. "Mr. Barnes will see everyone in about 5 minutes," she said. "Thank you for waiting." "Thanks," I answered automatically. Ethan just flicked his hand dismissively, eyes glued to his phone, probably flipping through credit lines or renovation mood boards. Kayla used the moment to check her makeup in her camera screen. I felt like I was sitting in between two worlds. On one side, this cold room, ironed shirts, polished shoes, sentences trimmed so they would sound good in front of a lawyer. On the other, a small wooden deck looking over grey-blue water, sticky screen doors, a leaky roof that still smelled like my dad's tobacco, and my mum's cooking. I didn't know what the will was going to say. I wasn't allowed to see it ahead of time. I never sat in on their meetings with the lawyer. All I knew for sure was that in the last months of her life, the person lying on the couch facing the water was my mum, and the person sitting beside her, checking her blood sugar and refilling her tea, was me, not Ethan, not Kayla. "She's probably going to cry and demand a share," Ethan muttered, just loud enough to slice straight through me. "But we can't let her steal our house." Steal? That was the word they'd pinned on me all week, in calls, in texts, in the little asides they thought I didn't hear. They said I brainwashed our parents while they were weak, took advantage of being the one doing the caregiving to sway them. No one mentioned all the years before that, when I was the kid standing at the sink doing dishes for 6, while Ethan got to run back down to the water. When Ethan broke a window with a baseball and I got yelled at for not watching him. I took a slow breath and turned to my aunt. "Auntie," I said quietly, "do you think, if the beach house ends up with him, is it still going to feel like Grandma's place used to feel?" She was silent for a long moment. She'd seen more than most of them. She knew who was in the hospital at 3 a.m. and who was only there long enough to get a photo. "All I know is this," she finally said, slow and soft. "The only one paying the taxes on that place these last few years was you. The only one sleeping on that hospital pullout and hauling your mama back here when she wanted to smell the ocean was you. As for who it belongs to, we'll see what your mama wrote." I nodded and squeezed her hand in thanks. My heart was still racing, but my breathing was starting to even out. The heavy door opened. Mr. Barnes appeared in the doorway, white hair neatly combed, a thick leather folder in his hand. "All right," he said, voice low and practiced. "If everyone's here, let's go in. Today we'll go over what your parents left behind." Everyone got up. Ethan went first, hand on the small of Kayla's back like he was walking her into some momentous signing. The kids trailed behind, eyes still glued to their phones. My aunt waited for me and took my elbow, lending me some of her steadiness. Just before I stepped through the doorway, I looked down at the keys in my hand one more time. Mum had said, "Don't let anyone take this from you," but she never told me what to do when the anyone was your own brother and his picture-perfect family. Maybe that's why I ended up writing this all down, because no matter what the lawyer read out, no matter whose name was on which line, I can't get rid of one question. Am I a terrible person for keeping the beach house my parents left to me entirely, instead of giving my golden child brother and his family a share? I didn't have a clear answer for myself that morning. When my aunt guided me into the office, the familiar smell of furniture polish and old paper wrapped around me. Mr. Barnes's office wasn't big, but it was tidy, a dark wooden desk, 2 bookshelves crammed with files, and one window looking out at the parking lot where the midday sun bounced off car windshields. Ethan sat across from the desk and pulled out Kayla's chair like a gentleman. He put his phone face down on the table, screen dark, but his hand stayed close, like he was afraid to miss something more important than his own parents' will. I took a seat a bit off to the left, next to my aunt. Not in the centre, but close enough to see every expression on my brother's face and every line on the lawyer's. "First of all," Mr. Barnes said, voice calm and even, "let me say I'm sorry for your loss. I know this isn't an easy day." Ethan nodded solemnly, his serious face picture perfect. Kayla dipped her head and dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a tissue, though her mascara didn't budge. I just gave the smallest nod, not sure I could get a word out without my voice cracking. Barnes opened the folder and pulled out a stack of clipped pages. "Your parents last updated their will about a year before they passed," he said, looking around. "It was signed in front of 2 disinterested witnesses, and we have a competency statement from their physician at the time. Legally, it's valid." I heard Ethan click his tongue. "Sounds like you're already gearing up for someone to contest it," he muttered. Barnes ignored that. "We'll go in order," he went on. "First the bank accounts and retirement funds, then the primary residence, and then we'll address the Seabrook vacation property that everyone is understandably interested in." His emphasis on those last words wasn't dramatic, but I caught it. Money came first, savings accounts, a small retirement fund, a couple of CDs. It was all split fairly evenly. A portion went to their church, another to a scholarship fund at the elementary school where my mum had taught. My aunt got a small bequest as a thank you for all the help she'd given them over the years. Ethan frowned at that. I felt relieved. The main house, the one we grew up in, was left to both of us jointly, with the stipulation that if one sibling ever wanted to sell, the other had first right to buy them out. Ethan didn't argue. He'd never been as attached to that house as he was to the beach place. The main house was just a tired little place in the suburbs, not exactly on brand for the lifestyle shots he and Kayla liked to post. Then Barnes paused, closed the stack in his hands, and reached for a thicker file with a different coloured tab. "Now," he said, "we come to the Seabrook vacation home, what you all call the beach house." The air in the room shifted. I heard the wall clock again. Even the kids looked up from their screens. Ethan leaned forward in his chair. Kayla squeezed his hand, eyes bright with anticipation. I forced myself to breathe and felt my fingers tighten around the keys in my pocket. "Before I read the dispositive provision," Barnes said, "your parents asked me to share some context and documents so everyone understands the reasons behind their decision." "What documents?" Ethan snapped. "These," Barnes replied. He opened the file and pulled out several stapled sets of pages. I could see Ethan's name in the headers, the faint carrier logos in the corners. Some pages were screenshots of text threads, bubble after bubble of grey and blue. My heart hammered. I knew some of those words. I'd seen a few of them on my mum's phone one rainy night at the beach house when she cried quietly and didn't want Dad to see. "You can't just," Ethan started, face flushing. "Your parents brought these messages and emails to me," Barnes said, still calm. "They asked me to preserve them as evidence of the pressure you were putting on them regarding that property. They wanted their will to reflect their free choice, not the result of coercion." Kayla's jaw clenched. "We were just—" "Let me read a few excerpts first," Barnes cut in, eyes on the page. He picked a sheet, adjusted his glasses and read slowly. "September 14th from Ethan, Miller. Dad, you have to move the beach house into an LLC with me on it. If you let her anywhere near the deed, you're asking for trouble. She doesn't even like kids. She'll just sell it the second you're gone." Each word landed like a small stone on tile. My aunt glanced at me, eyes full of sadness. Ethan threw out his arms. "That was just me worrying about my family," he protested. "I didn't say anything wrong." Barnes didn't argue. He picked up another sheet. "November 3rd, he went on, text message to Mrs. Miller. Mum, you know OP is manipulating you, right? She's at the beach house with you all the time because she wants you to feel guilty and leave it to her. Please don't fall for it. That place should go to the grandkids who will actually use it. 3 double quotes. The word manipulating punched me right in the gut. I remembered that day. It had poured rain. I'd taken my mum to a cardiology appointment, then driven her back to the beach house. We were both soaked. She'd checked her phone in the kitchen and gone quiet for a long time before slipping it back into her sweater pocket and changing the subject. If there was any manipulation that day, it was me trying to get her to drink hot tea and put on a thicker sweater because the ocean wind was chilly. "That's enough," Ethan exploded. "You have no right." "I do," Barnes said, cutting him off, still polite but firmer. For the first time that morning, he looked Ethan straight in the eye. "Your parents understood exactly what you and your wife were trying to do. They were not as naive as you assumed." Kayla sucked in a breath. "We were just trying to protect the family assets from nursing home issues, from taxes," she said, voice pitch rising. "Who doesn't do that?" "Let's see what they thought," Barnes replied, sliding the messages aside and pulling a different set of pages. Closer. He took a breath and began to read. Regarding the vacation home in Seabrook, which we usually call the beach house, we leave full ownership to our daughter, Olb, including any interest already in her name and the remainder of our interest. In my head, all the sounds cut out. All I heard was my own heartbeat. "What?" Ethan shouted. "All of it?" "Yes," Barnes said simply. "I'll read the explanatory portion they asked me to attach. This part isn't legally required, but they wanted you to understand." He flipped to the next page. It was a typed letter with my mum's shaky signature at the bottom and my dad's stronger one beside it. "We understand this decision may anger Ethan," Barnes read, his voice dipping, "but we have thought about it carefully. For years, our daughter has been the only one paying the property taxes on this house when we could not afford to. She fixed the roof after the storm, using her own savings to keep it from falling apart. I remembered climbing up on that roof with a local handyman, sweat running down my back, while Ethan posted pictures from some ski resort. I didn't think I was doing something noble. I just thought, if we don't fix this, the next storm will rip the whole thing off and Mum will be heartbroken. When their mother was very sick," Barnes continued, "Up was the one driving her to appointments, sleeping at the hospital, and then bringing her back to lie on the couch looking out at the ocean. Ethan and Kayla were busy with their lives, and we understand that. But we cannot ignore the reality of who was physically by our side when we needed help." He looked up briefly, and our eyes met. I dropped mine immediately, because if I didn't, I was going to cry. "In the messages Ethan sent us," he read on, "we saw not only concern, but also a desire to remove his sister from any say over this property." 2023. "To Ethan, the beach house is an investment project, a backdrop for his family image online. To Opie, it is home." Ethan slammed his palm on the desk. "That was just their opinion when they were sick," he shouted. "Mom was doped up on pain meds. How can you say she was completely lucid?" Barnes flipped to another form at the back of the packet. "This is Dr. Jacobs's capacity statement from the date they executed the will," he said. "It's signed and dated. She was fully competent." "I don't buy it," Ethan said, whipping his head toward our aunt. "You know, Aunt Susan, you know Mom at the end." My aunt looked at him, eyes tired but steady. "I know," she said. "I also know who held the basin when she threw up, who slept on the hospital chair, and who just dropped by for a couple of hours to snap photos with them and leave." Kayla's eyes flashed. "What's that supposed to mean? We have kids and jobs and—" "Nobody's blaming you for not being there every minute," my aunt sighed. "But don't pretend you were." Barnes went back to the letter. "For these reasons," he read, "we are leaving the beach house entirely to OP. We trust she will keep it as a home, not a commodity. We are leaving Ethan a cash bequest and his share in the primary residence, so he still has his own assets. But the beach house is not an automatic entitlement for anyone except the person who actually fought to keep it in the family these past years. My cousin, the one who had joked earlier about Ethan becoming beach house owner, was quiet now, staring at his hands. I didn't know you were paying the taxes," he mumbled in my direction. "I thought—" "You didn't ask," my aunt answered for me. "When your grandparents were strapped, she wired me the money and I walked it into the county office. I still have the receipts." I'd never planned to tell anyone about any of that. To me, it was just something that needed doing. But right then, I was grateful my aunt had been there to see it. Ethan turned on me, eyes wild. "You planned this, didn't you?" he yelled. "You brainwashed Mom. You fed her stories. You—" I took a deep breath and for the first time that day, looked him directly in the eye. "You really think Mom needed me to brainwash her to see who was actually there?" I asked, my voice rough. "You think she didn't know who was sending those messages? She read every single one, Ethan. She just didn't want to fight with you at the end of her life." Kayla started crying, but her tears didn't reach me anymore. "You're so selfish," she said, voice shaking but still sharp. "We promised our kids that the beach house would be theirs. You know how much they've been looking forward to that. Don't you feel bad for them? Feel bad for—" I looked at the kids. One was watching his mum with wide, confused eyes. The other stared down at his phone like he wanted to disappear into it. My heart twisted. I didn't want them to suffer for their parents' choices. I remembered them running up and down the sand, screaming, "Auntie, look at me!" while I showed them how to draw dolphins in the wet sand. "I do feel bad for them," I said slowly. "I don't feel bad for you two. You promised them something even their grandparents never promised you. The beach house is my parents, not Instagram's." Mr. Barnes cleared his throat, pulling us back toward procedure. "Legally," he said, "the distribution is clear. Ope is the sole lawful owner of the Seabrook property. Ethan has the rights laid out for him in the will, primarily the cash bequest and his interest in the primary residence. If you want specifics, I'll provide copies." "I'll sue," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "I'll get this overturned. I'll prove Mum wasn't competent. I'll prove you." Barnes slid another folder across the desk toward him. "You have every right to hire your own attorney," he said. "But I need to remind you that if this goes to court, all of those texts and emails you and your wife sent, along with testimony from people like your aunt, will become part of the public record. That may not be ideal for the image your wife is cultivating." Kayla blanched. She has never liked the phrase public record. "Image isn't what matters here," Ethan huffed, but his voice had lost some of its force. "This is about what's fair." "Fair," I echoed silently, thinking about all the summers when fair meant I did the dishes while he ran back to the water, all the times my parents told me not to make a big deal out of things he broke because he's a boy. If that was his definition of fair, I'd been living on the short end my whole life. The meeting ended under a heavy cloud. Some relatives came over to hug me and say things like, "You earned it," or "Your folks knew what they were doing." Others just hovered by the door, not ready to pick a side out loud. Ethan and Kayla stormed out first, feet pounding on the floor. "We won't forget this," Ethan said, pointing a finger at me before he left. "You stole my family's house. Don't expect anyone to forgive you." I was too tired to argue. "Think whatever you want," I said. "Mom knew who she was leaving it to. So did Dad. You didn't lose a house, Ethan. You lost a privilege you thought you were entitled to." Kayla yanked his arm, but before she turned away, she threw one last line at me in perfect, sharp English. "You'll die alone in that house, and no one will even remember you." My aunt flinched like she'd been slapped on my behalf. I just stood there. I thought of my mum on that couch at the beach, the two of us drinking coffee in our pajamas while the sun came up over the water. Not a single photo of those mornings ever made it online. They were just ours. If that's what dying alone looks like, I'm not sure I'm afraid of it. The days that followed felt like being stuck in a small storm I hadn't started. Kayla never called me directly, but I started hearing from other people that she'd posted a string of vague statuses on Facebook. Funny how some people suddenly become devoted children when real estate is involved. Sad when someone uses their parents' illness to twist a will in their favor. A few less plugged-in relatives would comment, fishing for details, and every time my aunt or a cousin or someone who'd actually been there would reply with something short like, "All I saw was one child at the hospital every night." I didn't jump into any of it. I deleted the Facebook app off my phone and kept one picture, my mum sitting by the big window at the beach house, afternoon light turning her white hair gold, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, eyes on the horizon. After my dad's funeral, I moved into the beach house. The place was quiet. It smelled like sand and salt, and faintly like disinfectant. The first night I slept in the bed she'd used, I tossed and turned, every little sound, the wind sneaking through the cracked window frame, the boards creaking, the waves thumping in the distance, felt like a reminder. You own this now. But owning didn't feel like winning. I just felt tired and deeply, deeply sad. One afternoon I was sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee, watching a couple of dog walkers in the distance on the empty beach. The air was salty and cold. A memory came back out of nowhere. I was about 12, Ethan 9. Mum was cooking chowder, the whole place smelling like onions, celery, cream, and clams. Dad was in the sagging armchair, beer in hand, feet up on the table. "Can I go down to the water with them?" Ethan begged, tossing a rubber ball in his hands. "I'll help with dishes later." "No," Dad said, eyes on the TV. "Your sister will handle dishes. You're a boy. Save your energy to play." Ethan made a face, then grinned and took off out the door. I stood in the kitchen, wooden spoon in my hand, cheeks burning. I'd been doing the dishes for years already. Just once I wanted to finish eating, put my plate down, and sprint to the water like he did. Mum looked at me, eyes tired but soft. "Let it go," she said quietly. "Wash for me, okay? He's a boy, your father." She trailed off, because we both knew how that sentence ended. "I'm his kid too," I muttered. But I rolled up my sleeves and turned on the hot water. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Mum pulled me out to the porch and spread out a thin blanket. "Come lie with me," she said. "Listen to the waves a bit before you sleep." We lay side by side on the old wooden bench under a sky full of stars. Mum's voice dropped to almost a whisper, like she was afraid the wind would overhear. "One day," she said, "if something is yours, you have to learn to say, 'This is mine,' okay? Don't be like me. I spent my whole life giving everything away, and now I don't have much that's really mine." I'd laughed it off back then. I didn't really get it. Sitting on the same porch decades later, I heard it like she was right there beside me. Maybe this house is the one thing that is actually mine in the way she meant. Not just on paper, but in the way it's woven into who I became. I didn't completely cut Ethan off. Whether I like it or not, he's still my brother. Every now and then he sends an email in this flat business tone. "If you're willing to sell the beach house to us under market value, I won't contest anything else in the will." I replied just as briefly, "I'm not selling. If you want a place at the beach, you can save up and buy one." Another time, he wrote, "The kids miss the beach house. I hope you're happy you've banned them from the home they grew up in." I read that line over and over. I don't want my niece and nephew punished for their parents' behavior. I remember how their faces lit up when we built sandcastles and roasted marshmallows. I remember the way they called it our ocean house. Finally, I wrote a longer email back. "I'm not banning the kids," I said. "I just won't turn every visit into another fight. If they want to spend a few days at the beach house, they're welcome to come with Aunt Susan or Cousin Jake. The door is open for them, but I'm not hosting you and Kayla here until you can treat me like a person instead of an obstacle in your asset plan." He never answered that one. But about a month later, I got a text from an unknown number that turned out to be my oldest niece. "Auntie," she wrote, "Dad is really mad at you, but I miss the ocean house. Can I come if I go with Aunt Susan?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "Of course you can. You'll always have a place here. Bring a warm jacket. The wind's chilly." When my aunt pulled up with the kids, I stood on the porch feeling weirdly like I was waiting for a job interview. But when they barreled out of the car and wrapped their arms around me, smelling like cheap shampoo and sunscreen, something inside me unclenched. Later they asked if their parents could come next time. I looked at my aunt, then out at the water. "Probably not any time soon," I said honestly. "The grown-ups still have some things to work out, but you kids are different. None of this is your fault." That night I showed them how to make s'mores out back, like I used to do with Ethan. My oldest niece stared up at the sky and asked, "Dad said you stole our house, did you?" I took a breath. I didn't want to pour adult poison into their heads, but I also wasn't going to lie. "I didn't steal anything," I said slowly. "Grandma and Grandpa decided to leave this house to me because I was the one staying here with them while they were sick. Dad's angry, and I understand that, but this house was their decision, not mine." "So, we still get to come here?" she asked, worry creasing her forehead. "As long as you want, and as long as I'm breathing," I said, ruffling her hair. "As long as you don't smear burnt marshmallows on my couch." They shrieked with laughter. Their giggles rose up and mixed with the low roar of the ocean, and for a moment I thought, maybe this is what a real legacy looks like. Not a line in a legal document, but a place kids remember feeling safe and happy. One night after they'd gone home, I opened my laptop and logged back into Reddit for the first time in a while. I read other people's stories. Scapegoat kids, golden children, farms and houses torn apart by wills and expectations. I saw the same patterns I'd lived with, just in other names, other towns. I opened a new post. My fingers hovered for a second, then started to move. I'm a 52F. My younger brother is 49M. All my life, he's been the golden child. I laid it all out. The dishes when we were kids, the messages he sent, the will reading, Kayla telling me I'd die alone. I didn't paint myself as a saint. I admitted the ugly parts too, the nights I fantasized about selling the house and moving somewhere where no one knew me or my family. I ended with the question I couldn't stop hearing. Am I the asshole for keeping my parents' vacation home entirely to myself instead of giving my brother a share, knowing he has kids, and I don't? I wasn't expecting much. I figured some strangers might tell me I was right, some might say I was selfish. But over the next weeks, I got more than that. You didn't steal the house, one comment said. You just stopped letting yourself be robbed. Another user, who said they were in their 60s, wrote, Your parents did something rare. For the first time in their lives, they stood up for the scapegoat kid instead of the golden child. Don't throw away that late-in-life apology just to buy peace with people who were never fair to you. Someone else added, I get feeling bad for the kids, but if you sacrifice the one thing that's finally yours because of promises their parents made without authority, you're repeating the exact cycle your mum warned you about when you were 12. I sat there reading, laughing and crying at the same time, not because I needed internet strangers to tell me I was right, but because for the first time, I didn't feel completely alone in my version of the story. That night I turned off all the lights and cracked the window. The wind blew in with the salt and the sound of waves. On the table was a printed copy of the letter my mum had written to go with the will. Mr. Barnes had sent me a scanned daughter. She'd written in her shaky hand, You have spent your whole life giving way. This time, if anyone says you're greedy, remember that I signed my name under this decision. If they want to be angry, they can be angry at me. I laid my palm over that line and took a long breath. If my brother told this story, I'd be the villain, the bitter, childless sister who grabbed the family's vacation home. I can't stop him from telling it that way. All I can do is live with the version I actually lived. The girl who always stood at the sink while everyone else rested, who finally has a kitchen of her own. The kid who lay on this porch while her mum whispered and, Don't let them take everything from you. And who finally understands what that meant. If that makes me the bad guy in some people's eyes, I guess I'll have to live with that. But in this little house by the ocean, with the salt in the air and the wood under my feet and the waves in my ears, I know one thing. I'm not a shadow anymore. I'm the one holding the keys. And this time, I'm not handing them over just because someone else thinks they deserve them more than I do.